And now we are about to get very, very serious because in the world of wrestling, we're always waiting for the next feud, the next rivalry. We're talking about Hogan versus Andre, Alicia Fox versus Melina, Stone Cold versus The Rock. And in 2016, what was the one feud that defined the year that when you go back in the WWE Network for $9.99, what is the one rivalry you want to go back to and enjoy? So we got 5 different ones that we added here. At number 1, we have AJ Styles versus John Cena. At number 2, we have The Miz versus Dolph Ziggler. At number 3, we have Samoa Joe and the things that happened between him and Shinsuke Nakamura. Regal! At 4, we have Sasha Banks versus Charlotte. And at number 5, we have AJ Styles versus Dean Ambrose.
Well, you get number 6 in there, too.
Yeah, we added a 6. There's Sami Zayn versus Kevin Owens.
True. Just one thing. I got me a piece of paper. This doesn't update automatically. So if you guys don't tell me that...
Well, welcome to the digital age.
We got you, fam.
And Juan, before we get into it, I'd like to quickly say... You won't find these people on WWE Ride Along on the WWE Network.
I won't.
That's all I got.
I expected more. I wanted a little bit more juice. Anyway. So we got 6. We got to cut 3 to get down to the final 3. Between all the stuff, you could add something like Becky Lynch versus Alexa Bliss. I think that has also been a good feud. I don't think it would be in the top 3, but I do think that should at least be brought up here. Now, between the different feuds that have been happening, I think we should start with The Miz versus Dolph Ziggler because that feud had a peak, right? When Dolph Ziggler put his career on the line, we were saying, okay, so the man is going to retire. He's going to have The Miz be elevated because then he's going to get all that hatred from the people that didn't want Dolph Ziggler to leave. But then that didn't actually happen. He actually won the title. And if a feud is about the conclusion, right, like the end of the story, and not just about the ride, although the ride is a lot of times better than the conclusion, I think that fell a little bit dry, where at the beginning it had a lot of promise.
The Miz versus Dolph Ziggler, if we're talking essentially from when The Miz flips out on Daniel Bryan up until Dolph Ziggler wins the IC title at, what was it No Mercy?
Mm-hmm.
Yeah.
Up until that point, that's probably my favorite feud of the year. I think the rivalry was great. The promos were amazing. Dolph Ziggler putting on his career on the line. All of it made sense. All of it was awesome. Dolph Ziggler should have freaking retired, man. And then that would have been my feud of the year. But because it lost a lot of steam after that, and it kind of was up and down from there on, it's tough, but I don't want to I don't want to give up on it yet because it was still so amazing at the beginning portions of it.
Okay, so we're going to hold that off.
It definitely had the highest peak and the lowest valley of any feud because, like Ryan mentioned, everything up to that No Mercy match was gold. And even some of it after was still not bad. It was just Dolph Ziggler that kind of fell flat because The Miz has been great this entire time. It would almost be better if The Miz was feuding with himself post No Mercy.
He'd love that.
Right? But even the bad wasn't really that bad. Like they got back to a good place by the end of the feud. Like if we're calling TLC the end of the feud, it ended in a decent place. It ended in a good place. So it's hard to write it off that easy.
What about Samoa Joe versus Nakamura and Regal? Now, I know I'm the one that added this. I just wanted to add the context because for those that didn't watch NXT, the reason I enjoyed this feud was because although Nakamura was primarily the champion, even though him and Samoa Joe have been exchanging the titles, I love how there's a feud between the champion or the wrestler and Samoa Joe with a guy like Regal. And then Samoa Joe basically going, if you don't give me what I want, I'll just tear the roster down. And then he actually does it. So taking out like an entire tag team, interrupting matches. You see actual consequence to the point where Regal has to act. He has to take action and actually basically, give Joe what he wants. So I think that's really good because we don't see something like that nowadays done well, right? We have things like The Authority versus Dana Bryan. And that was something, but it felt like Samoa Joe was just a one-man wrecking machine, and the world was trying to contain him, but he was able to break free. And I really appreciated the feud because of that, but I don't know if you guys feel as strongly as I do. I know, Ryan, you haven't really watched NXT week to week to really, give your thoughts about that. So I'm perfectly okay with it not being top 3, but I do think it should be brought up in this list.
I will remove myself from this one because I can't really speak to it. So if both of you believe it should be in the top 3, I will let that happen.
I can't say that I feel as strong as you about it, Juan, but I do think that it is overall, especially from the Samoa Joe versus William Regal angle, it is stronger than some of the other feuds on this list. With that, I'd like to take a bit of a pivot step towards Sasha Banks versus Charlotte and propose that being cut. Because yes, the matches are great, and they've had a lot of them this year. But I would argue that it is the most predictable feud of this year as far as wins and losses go. And everything around the matches, keep in mind, we just nominated for... It was the crux of what we nominated for things the WWE shoved down our throat. If it was like chain of matches of the year, I think they would do all right. But I don't think that they are one of the top feuds of this year.
I would agree. I think that Sasha Banks and Charlotte can always tear the house down, always have amazing matches. But yeah, Charlotte has gotten much, much better as a heel. She's one of the best heels in the company. But a lot of the content in between the matches has not been anything significant, has not been anything amazing when you compare it to something like the amazing content we got in between matches with The Miz and Dolph Ziggler. It's just not even close to that level for me. So I agree it should be cut.
And even the matches started to follow a formula where you knew that, okay, it's a pay-per-view match. Guess Charlotte wins this one. Hey, what do you know? Charlotte won. Oh, there's a women's title match on Raw. Looks like Sasha's going to win this
and
one.
Some of the pay-per-view matches were not incredible either. I mean, they've had a lot of great matches, but not all of them have been like insanely good.
Agreed.
Yeah, I think you guys make a good argument about it, where in a lot of these, we got to keep in mind, great match doesn't mean great feud, because you go back to The Miz versus Dolph Ziggler, and my favorite part about that feud is not the matches. I remember the story. I remember the motivation where, The Miz is basically bringing up the fact that, Ziggler used to be part of the Spirit Squad. Then the Spirit Squad actually comes in as part of the storyline, mentioning that he's a caddy, how he's always fell short. And the story is what made every punch in that match matter, right? So keeping that in mind, I totally get why Sasha versus Charlotte should be removed. Now, under that, I would also remove AJ Styles versus John Cena. I think AJ versus Dean was a much better rivalry.
I agree.
Yeah, going on a rivalry and a story being told. The whole beat-up John Cena thing was pretty good, though. So, I hate to remove it, but if we're going by just the development of a feud and how things have played out, AJ versus Dean is better.
And the one thing, the one thing I'll say quickly here is that it's very easy to care about a rivalry that involves John Cena because he's John Cena. You can put him against a piece of toilet paper, and people are gonna be like, "Man, that toilet paper's gonna get the rub." Why am I saying that?
You could have picked a better thing there.
I was going to say piece of paper.
That was worded perfectly.
I added the word toilet. Change the whole thing. I'm trying to be serious here. So, with AJ versus Dean, I did not care about Dean Ambrose. Because of what we talked about all the way back in Biggest Disappointment with Brock Lesnar. But they found a way to get AJ and Dean into a really good spot where they are the top thing happening on SmackDown. You get James Ellsworth involved, and you have like this story triangle that actually is entertaining. You're figuring out ways for a champion to lose, yet it makes sense. Like AJ's lost to Ellsworth as of this recording 3 times. And that team's, in any other scenario, people would be saying WWE is burning AJ Styles. They're doing nothing with him. No, it makes sense because they use James Ellsworth as like a glue to keep the feud together. Even when AJ is like injured or Ambrose is maybe slightly booed, they bring Ellsworth in. There's layers of character development. You have basically a sidekick or a mascot in Ellsworth, and you get a ridiculous character like that over. I mean, I'll just wear my No Chin Music, not sure, but cap right now because I really do support this. And I'll say it's like at least in the top 2 for me. I don't know about you guys.
No, I agree. The fact that this feud has really done it all this year, where you get the fun points between James Ellsworth, AJ Styles, and Dean Ambrose, and all of that is backed up by phenomenal matches between AJ and Dean. Like, they had great matches on SmackDown. Their TLC match was amazing. You get all of that surrounded by just fun that they have with James Ellsworth added into the mix. And I 100% agree with you that it is one of the best feuds of this year.
Now, there's one that we haven't touched yet, and that is Sami Zayn versus Kevin Owens. Now, this is more towards the beginning of the year, and this was a feud that I think we wanted to maybe not happen right away, but they ended up kind of going right to it once Sami Zayn was officially on the roster. And given the brand split and everything that went down there, even though they're still in the same brand, it was good that it happened when it did. Now, the one thing I'll recall with this feud was, I mean, these guys always have amazing chemistry, but it was not their first WWE pay-per-view match that I felt like really took it to the next level, but I believe it was the one after is where it was, one of the best matches of the year and just an awesome
I believe you're speaking
feud.
of the match at Battleground.
Yes. So where do you guys position this? Because I haven't quite made up my mind yet.
It was a great feud, but during the whole thing, it all kind of beat the same drum the whole time, where it was they're going to fight forever. And that was kind of their whole thing beginning to end, and then they just kind of traded wins back and forth throughout that whole thing. Great matches, especially that one at Battleground, but it was kind of a one-note feud beginning to end. Yeah, I would say cut it.
My argument is for a top 3. And, Sami Zayn versus Kevin Owens, like I said, their Battleground match, up there for match of the year. But looking at the feud itself, my top 3, in no particular order at this moment, is Styles and Cena, Styles and Ambrose, and The Miz and Dolph Ziggler.
If we cut Sasha Banks versus Charlotte, we got to cut Zayn Owens. Because they fall in the same category of exceptional matches. But when you look at the feud, what do you guys say? They were trading off, victories, or it was
I don't remember
awesome
any
matches.
Promos or anything. The stuff in between isn't memorable.
Yeah. Exactly. So they are the same thing, and they're both great. But the story, the rivalry, aside from the matches, I don't think was memorable. Especially when you look at what happened with Sami Zayn. At the end, they just kind of like, okay, he's part of Raw because Kevin Owens had to become the Universal Champion, and I guess that's how we end the feud. It never ended.
I mean, you look at the other 3. You look at Styles and Cena, right? You remember the whole beat up John Cena thing. AJ Styles doing the champ that runs the camp, the face that runs the place, getting inside Cena's head. Miz and Dolph Ziggler, you have all the memorable promos with the Spirit, and then you have the Spirit Squad coming in. Then you can look at AJ and Dean, and you have everything with James Ellsworth. Like, you remember all the story factors from those 3, and that's why I think they belong in the top 3.
Joe and Nakamura, though, and I think that AJ Cena gets cut before that.
I agree. Let's not forget something. Once again, for anybody that doesn't watch NXT is a 1-hour show. And the majority of the roster, I'm not going to say is in developmental, but they're not who you tune in for, right? Because they rated the roster, so you have your Charlotte, Sasha, Bayley, everybody got moved up. So in NXT, it's not just that Samoa Joe has been a great champion and a great wrestler. The man has been carrying the company in NXT, I mean, because, for example, somebody like Nakamura is not exactly an expert at the microphone. Whenever he talks, it's very limited. So it's up to Samoa Joe to further those storylines. So think about 2016 would be nothing in NXT without Samoa Joe. It just would not be. Plus, keep in mind that the reason Samoa Joe became the big deal that he did is because he destroyed Finn Balor before he became Universal Champion, which is funny, right? So he dethroned him, yet Balor becomes the first ever Universal Champion, showing how strong a guy like Samoa Joe is. So my top 3, it would be Samoa Joe versus Regal, or like Samoa Joe against NXT. I'd say we can summarize that up as. Number 2, I would put The Miz versus Dolph Ziggler. And I would put number 1, AJ versus Dean. If Dolph Ziggler did become retired, or they did something to really make it feel like it was going to be more real, that would have been my number 1. But because that's not the case, I got to go with AJ versus Dean because I've been enjoying it. I know some people are like, Ellsworth, take him off. They've done good writing to the point where they can reinvent the character without overexposing it for a guy like you, Ryan. Because even you, every week, we're saying, oh man, next week, they're going to do it too much. And you said that for like a month and a half.
Yeah, they've always added something new. They've put a twist on things. They've kept it interesting the whole time. A lot of people think, oh, this Ellsworth thing, it's affecting AJ's career. I mean, he's the WWE champion. He's putting on amazing matches. Him losing to Ellsworth, we all know that it's always due to interference and things like that. And AJ's gonna get his revenge back, all of that. So it's really... like, I don't think that's a detriment to AJ at all. This feud's been great. It's for the fact that it's been going as long as it has and remaining interesting is pretty awesome.
Yeah, if there wasn't those great matches with Dean Ambrose mixed into this whole thing, it would have absolutely affected AJ's career. But because you're really getting the best of both worlds all lumped in this feud, I think it is the best feud of the year easily. And agree with it being at number 1.
Very happy with how this played out. I know that out of all the categories that we've done up to this point, this may be the most controversial one, because everybody has their favorite rivalry or feud, because you have your favorite superstar, which we are going to be getting to later on. So without further ado, for Byte That 2016's feud of the year, at number 3, we have Samoa Joe versus NXT. At number 2, we have The Miz versus Dolph Ziggler. And at number 1, we have AJ Styles versus Dean Ambrose. And you can shoehorn maybe a little James Ellsworth into the mix. And hopefully everybody's fairly satisfied with Byte That's overall selection. I'm pretty happy about it.
Feeling good.
Talking Smack, the Cruiserweight Classic, WWE NXT, which has been the best network show for 2016. We're about to talk about that right now here on Byte That, so click on the screen, click on the button that's right there. Click it good.